Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. Grab your drink, sit down, and lean in, because today's story starts after the love is already dead. The engagement ring had been in the freezer for 3 weeks, right next to the peas. That wasn't a metaphor. I literally wedged it between 2 half-used bags of frozen vegetables, like some cursed relic I couldn't quite throw away. Every time I reached for ice, I saw it staring back at me. Cold metal, colder memories. But last night, I finally took it out. Not because I forgave her, not because I missed her, but because I knew exactly where she was, and exactly who she was with. Her coworker. His name? Jude. Tall. Gym fit. One of those guys who wears loafers without socks and says things like, good vibes only. They met at a networking brunch and apparently clicked. That was her word. Clicked. As if her loyalty was a light switch and I was just a dim bulb. I knew where they'd be. Jude always posted photos like he was being paid in Instagram likes. Dim lip bars, overpriced sliders, just vibes. And like clockwork, there it was, a story post. Her in the background, laughing, wearing the same dress she once wore when she said yes to me. So I put the ring back in its box. The velvet one I used to practice opening with one hand like some kind of idiot. I scribbled a note. 5 words. You finally look comfortable, Liz. And I headed straight to her place. You're probably expecting me to say I kicked the door in, shouted something dramatic, threw the ring across the room. No, I still had the key. She never thought to ask for it back. Or maybe she just didn't think I'd use it. I stepped inside. Quiet. Like a ghost retracing his own death. The apartment was too clean. New cushions. A different rug. Someone else's shoes near the door. I walked to the bedroom. Our old bedroom. And left the box dead center on the neatly made bed. I placed the note beside it, tucked under the edge like a signature on a painting. Then I took my key off my chain, dropped it in her crystal bowl of earrings, and left. No words. No warning. Just silence. But here's where it gets weird. I should have walked away feeling empty. Broken. Betrayed. Instead, I smiled. Because I knew something she didn't. Something Jude didn't either. And by the time they found out, they'd be begging for the version of me that left a ring behind. By the time I reached my car, I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even angry. I was still. And in that stillness, something clicked. Not like her and Jude's little connection. No, this was different. This was the sound of a man finally waking up after sleeping through his own life. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove 2 towns over to a quiet cafe where nobody knew me. I ordered black coffee, no sugar, no cream, and sat by the window, watching people live lives that didn't include betrayal. Then I pulled out my phone and opened a folder I hadn't touched in weeks. Inside it, screenshots, dozens of them, photos of Liz and Jude, some public, some private. One from her shared album, accidentally uploaded, a mirror selfie of her in his apartment, wearing my hoodie, the one I thought she lost. You know how people say, if you have nothing nice to say nothing at all. Yeah, I used to live by that. But silence only protects liars. And I was done protecting Liz from the truth she built her fantasy on. So I started writing. Not a rant. Not revenge porn. Just facts. I made a timeline. I included her texts. I wrote out what she told me when she said she was going to her mom's, but was actually checking into a hotel 2 miles from our apartment. I made sure to remove anything too personal. No threats, no photos, no doxing. I followed every rule. I knew exactly where the line was, and I stood just behind it. Then I emailed it. Not to Liz. Not to Jude. But to someone else. I sent it to her boss. Why? Because Liz and Jude worked at the same boutique PR agency. And she just got promoted to lead a partnership campaign for a family brand that prided itself on transparency, loyalty, and values. Her words, not mine. She had bragged for weeks about the contract, how it could launch her into executive leadership. I simply gave her employer a peek behind the curtain. No commentary. No accusations. Just facts. Then I turned my phone off. Completely off. Threw it in the glove box and drove north without a destination. Windows down. Music off. Just the sound of tires on asphalt and a pressure in my chest slowly dissolving. When I finally pulled into a roadside motel that night, I slept for 10 hours straight. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls. 12 from Liz. 3 from an unknown number. 1 from Jude. I didn't answer any of them. But the voicemail Liz left? It wasn't the voice of the confident, sharp-tongued woman I used to know. It was panic. Raw, breathless panic. She was sobbing, begging me to talk to her. She kept repeating, "Why would you do this to me?" As if I was the one who'd ripped our life apart. As if I was the villain in her twisted version of events. And then she said something that made my heart stop. "They suspended me, Curtis. They said I violated ethics protocol. They're launching an internal review. You're ruining everything." That's when I realized she still didn't get it. She thought this was about revenge. But it wasn't. It was about the truth finally breathing daylight. And I was just getting started. The truth about Liz was simple. She loved control more than she loved people. She built her identity like a brand. Always polished, always performing. Her social media was curated like a museum gallery. Inspirational quotes, morning matcha shots, candid photos that weren't candid at all. She didn't just want admiration, she needed it to function. And now, all of that was cracking. 2 days after the email, I returned to town. I didn't go home. I still had a small storage unit on the edge of the city, originally meant for my late uncle's record collection. I turned it into a quiet hideaway. A fold-out chair, a mini fridge, a cot. Enough to disappear, but still watch everything unfold. It felt pathetic at first, like I was running away. But the more Liz tried to contact me, the more I realized disappearing was the only way I'd ever be heard. Her messages went from furious to frantic to almost poetic. She said she was being harassed by coworkers who suspected the truth. She blamed me for blowing things out of proportion. And then, on the third day, she sent a picture of us. From 2 years ago, a beach trip. I was sunburnt and goofy. She was tan, glowing, eyes squinting at me like I was her whole world. She captioned it, "Don't you remember this version of us?" I stared at it for a long time. And then I did something that shocked even me. I replied, one sentence, "I remember it. That version of us died the day you started lying." And then I blocked her. I thought that would be the end. But I underestimated how far Liz would go to save her image. A week later, I got a call from my sister, Dana. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. She sounded hesitant, then said, "Liz came by Mom's house. She was crying. Said you were spiraling. That you needed help. That she was worried you'd hurt yourself." I went silent. That was the moment something broke in me. Not sadness. Not anger. Just disbelief. Liz had turned me into the unstable one. She was setting the stage to be the victim. A master manipulator painting herself in soft, tragic tones, while casting me as the bitter, broken ex-fiancé who couldn't let go. And unfortunately, it was working. A few mutual friends texted me, hinting I should talk things out with her. One even asked if I'd been drinking more lately. I was being erased, rewritten. But what Liz didn't know was that I hadn't shared everything yet. The email to her boss? That was just the first pebble. There was more. Messages she sent to Jude while she was still telling me she loved me. Conversations where she mocked me, called me safe, a comfort blanket, soft. One even said, "He's sweet, but he'd never survive without me." She said I was weak. But what's truly weak is hiding behind a mask, afraid the world might see who you really are. And I was done hiding. The next move I made, it wouldn't just shake Liz's image. It would collapse it entirely. And all I had to do was send one tiny package. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even about exposing her anymore. It was about the principle. About showing Liz, and everyone else, that people like me, the quiet ones, the overly patient ones, the so-called soft ones, can burn down a lie with the precision of a scalpel, not a torch. The package was small. Simple. No return address. Just her name, handwritten on the front in the same careful lettering I used to write on her birthday cards. Inside, I placed a USB drive. That's all. No note. No threats. Just the drive. On it, I had compiled every text, voice memo, and candid screenshot she'd sent to Jude and her friends during the final months of our engagement. But the real gem? A recording from our smart speaker, the one she never figured out how to disable. One night, 3 months before I left, I'd come home late from a work trip. She was already asleep, or so I thought. But the speaker had picked up a voice command, "Play bedroom playlist." Except it wasn't Liz who said it. It was Jude. His voice. In our home. At our speaker. While I was across the state thinking about what flowers to order for her birthday. I made sure that clip was at the very beginning of the folder on the USB. I didn't send it to her home. I sent it to her office. I knew she'd open it there, probably thinking it was something from a vendor or a client. She was always rushing through things like that. Too busy, too self-important to pay attention. But this? Oh, she'd pay attention. I shipped it express. Then I waited. 3 days later, my sister texted me a link to a social media post. Her caption, "You seeing this?" It was Liz. Or rather, what was left of her online persona. Her once flawless professional account was now deactivated. Her clean energy partnership profile had vanished. And her personal page? Gone. Just gone. No more perfectly posed brunches. No more hashtags about loyalty or growth or empowerment. Just silence. Then, I got the email. It wasn't from Liz. It was from her assistant. She said Liz had taken a leave of absence for personal reasons, that she wouldn't be attending the upcoming product launch, and all client-facing duties would be reassigned. I almost felt sorry for her assistant. She was polite, professional, probably caught in the middle of a mess she didn't create. But I didn't respond. Later that evening, I got a call. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was Jude. He sounded dazed. Not angry. Not defensive. Just drained. "Curtis, look. Man, I don't know what you're trying to do here, but it's messed up. She's not doing well. Like, really not well. I don't know what you want, but if it's some kind of payback." I stopped the message right there. Deleted it. He didn't get it either. This wasn't about payback. This was about accountability. Liz built her life on half-truths and curated moments. She lied to protect her image, used people like props, and discarded anything that didn't serve her narrative. She underestimated me. She thought I'd fall apart quietly. But instead of collapsing, I documented everything. And now, the only thing she had left to defend was the truth. And even that was already gone. I wasn't expecting her to show up in person. After everything, after the lies, the manipulation, the social collapse, I thought she'd stay hidden behind silence and curated damage control. But Liz never did anything quietly. When her performance crumbled, her instinct wasn't to reflect, it was to rewrite. And now, she wanted to rewrite me. It was a Thursday morning. I had just picked up a black coffee and a dry cinnamon bagel from the corner shop I'd been using as my temporary office. I sat by the window, checking freelance emails, avoiding anything with her name on it. Then I saw the reflection first, her coat, that unmistakable burnt orange trench she wore like a badge of style. She was standing outside, alone. No makeup, no sunglasses, just her. I didn't move. I half hoped she'd keep walking. Instead, she stepped inside, eyes scanning until they locked with mine. "Curtis," she said, like we were meeting for brunch, not months after a betrayal that dismantled both our lives. I didn't say anything. She sat down across from me without asking. Her hands were shaking. "You win," she whispered. I let the silence linger. Let her sit with the weight of her own sentence. What did winning even mean in her world? That I finally had power? That I embarrassed her first? That people saw what she was capable of? "I lost everything," she said, voice cracking. "My job, my brand deals, my friends." That last one made me pause. Not because I cared, but because she still said my friends like they were possessions. Like she could own loyalty the way she owned accessories. "You didn't lose them," I said calmly. "You showed them who you really were. That's not a loss, it's exposure." She flinched. For once, she didn't have a snappy comeback or some faux deep quote about personal growth. Just silence. Her eyes darted between the table and my face, unsure which held more judgment. "I was scared," she said finally. "I didn't know how to tell you things weren't working. I didn't mean for it to go that far with Jude. I didn't mean to hurt you." The word "mean" rang in my ears like a dull alarm. It wasn't the first time she'd said it. Liz was a master of unintentional pain. Every wound she caused was wrapped in excuses and delivered with that same breathless tone of remorse. "I believed in us," I said, my voice lower than I expected. "Even when you stopped wearing the ring. Even when you laughed at my plans. Even when you left me out of every version of your future, I still believed in us. But you," I caught my breath. "You believed in options." Her mouth opened, but no words came. She looked smaller somehow. Less like the towering figure who once lit up every room, and more like someone finally standing in their own shadow. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she murmured. "Good," I said, "because I don't owe you closure." She stared at me, eyes wide, like that was the one thing she didn't plan for. She thought I'd need this, that I'd need her apology, her tears, her regret. But I didn't. I stood up, picked up my bagel and coffee, and looked her straight in the eye. "I already said goodbye," I said. "You just weren't listening." Then I walked out. No dramatic exit. No parting shot. Just the quiet truth finally spoken without fear. But later that day, when I checked my inbox, there was one unread email that made my chest tighten. It wasn't from Liz. It was from Jude. And the subject line? "You think you know everything. Read this before you decide you're done." I wasn't going to open it. I stared at Jude's email for 20 minutes, just watching the subject line blink like a dare. "You think you know everything. Read this before you decide you're done." It sounded arrogant, smug, like some final jab to remind me he'd won. But the longer I let it sit there, the more it gnawed at me. If there was even the slightest chance he wasn't writing to gloat, I had to know. So I clicked. There was no greeting, just a paragraph. Blunt, raw, almost frantic in tone. "Look, I'm not trying to make excuses, and I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but this isn't what it looks like. Liz lied to me too. She told me you two were separated. She said you were still living together for financial reasons, but hadn't been a couple for almost a year. She never wore the ring. She made me believe she was just staying until she could afford to move out." I froze. My pulse inched upward, but I kept reading. "I only found out the truth after I saw your message to her, the one you left with the ring. That's when I started asking questions." She flipped. "She said you were unstable, manipulative. But the more I looked back, the more stuff stopped adding up. She played both of us. I know that doesn't undo anything. I'm not looking for redemption. I just wanted you to know you weren't crazy. And you weren't the only one she used." No attachments. No photos. Just words. Words that hit like a gut punch and left me sitting in silence, rereading the lines over and over. I wasn't sure what stunned me more, the possibility that Jude had been lied to as well, or the realization that Liz had created an entire fictional timeline and sold it to both of us like gospel. Suddenly, all those nights she was too tired to talk, all those cold shoulders and sudden errands, they weren't signs of resentment. They were part of a double life. A theater performance where I was cast as the invisible man, while Jude played the unwitting side character in a romance that didn't really exist. For a long time, I thought I was the weak one, the soft one. But now, I realized Liz had mistaken my patience for blindness. And she mistook my silence for stupidity. That was her real flaw. She underestimated the damage honesty could do when it was finally spoken aloud. Still, Jude's email left me with something I hadn't felt in weeks. Doubt. Not about myself, but about how far Liz had gone, and how many other lies were layered beneath the ones I had already uncovered. If she told him we were separated, how many others believed that too? How many versions of me did she create, depending on the audience? I typed out a reply, then deleted it. I didn't know Jude anything. He may have been misled, but he still crossed a line. Intentions didn't erase impact. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Something even worse than what I already knew. That night, I dug into our old shared cloud storage. I hadn't touched it since I moved out, but I still had access. Photos, notes, documents. It was mostly benign, but buried deep in a folder labeled Archive Docs, I found a video file I'd never seen before. No label, no date. I pressed play, and what I heard in the first 10 seconds made my stomach drop. It was Liz's voice, drunk, slurring, laughing with someone else in the background. And then, clear as day, she said, "I could make Curtis disappear tomorrow, and no one would even notice." I paused the video. My hand trembled. She wasn't just lying. She was erasing me, one step at a time. And I finally understood. This wasn't just a breakup. This was war. That line, that one line kept echoing in my skull long after I closed the laptop. I could make Curtis disappear tomorrow, and no one would even notice. She said it so casually, like she was talking about deleting an app or canceling a dinner reservation. But it wasn't just the words, it was the tone. Light, smug, effortless. Like I was never a person to her. Just a role. A placeholder in her carefully arranged life until something shinier came along. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark of the storage unit, laptop screen closed, mind wide open. My thoughts ran wild. What else had she said when she thought no one was listening? How long had she viewed me as disposable? And the worst part? I didn't even feel broken anymore. I felt something colder, something quieter. I felt done, not in the angry, get even way, but in the final, lights out kind of way. Liz had spent months painting a version of me to suit her lies. And maybe I couldn't undo the damage, but I could make sure the full picture came into focus. So I called Dana, my sister. She had always been my voice of reason, the one person who hadn't judged me for how long I stayed with Liz. I told her everything, about the file, the quote, the way Jude had unknowingly confirmed everything I feared. She didn't interrupt, didn't rush to comfort me. When I finished, she just said, "You're not disappearing. You're documenting." That line hit me harder than I expected. The next day, I bought a new external hard drive. I copied everything: texts, emails, photos, audio clips, timelines, even screen recordings of Liz's social accounts before they vanished. Not because I planned to release it, but because I needed a record. My side of the story, preserved outside her manipulation. And then I wrote her one last letter. Not dramatic, not cruel, just honest. You once said I was too soft, that I didn't have it in me to stand up for myself. Maybe you were right. Maybe I let things go too often, tried too hard to keep the peace, gave you too many chances. But I see now that you mistook my grace for weakness. You didn't just betray me, you erased me. Or tried to. But the thing about quiet people is, we remember everything. And one day, the silence speaks louder than anything you've ever screamed. You won't hear from me again. Not directly, but you'll feel the echo. I didn't sign it. I didn't send it digitally. I printed it, folded it, sealed it in an envelope with no return name. Then I dropped it in her building's mail slot and walked away without looking back. By that point, I thought the story was over. Until a week later, I received a package at my sister's house. No name, just a box. Light, silent. Inside, the engagement ring, and a note. Not from Liz, but from her mother. I hadn't spoken to her mother since the engagement party. Back then, she was warm, welcoming, proud to call me her future son-in-law. I remember she told me Liz was finally grounded, that I brought out a part of her no one else could. I believed that. I clung to it during the worst moments, when Liz grew distant, when her affection became transactional. But opening that box, seeing her handwriting again, I didn't know what to expect. The note was written on cream stationery with tiny pressed flowers along the border. Her script was elegant, like someone raised in a house where people still mailed thank you cards. Curtis, I don't know what she told you. I don't know what she's told anyone. But I want you to know, some of us saw what she became. And I'm sorry. I watched her turn into someone I barely recognize. You were kind to her, loyal, steady. I know she mistook that for weakness. But I didn't. You deserved better than what you got. And you still do. I found the ring in her drawer. I'm returning it to you, not because it's worth anything anymore, but because you deserve to decide what happens to it next. Not her. I hope you find peace, real love, and a future untouched by the chaos she brought into your life. Eleanor. I sat with the note for hours. I read it again, and again, until the truth finally settled in like sunlight creeping through closed blinds. I wasn't broken. I was free. Free from her manipulation, her stories, her need to control the narrative. Free from the illusion that her love was something I had to earn. I had spent so long doubting myself, thinking maybe I had done something wrong. Maybe I hadn't been exciting enough, bold enough, man enough. But no, I was simply honest, steady, and now, finally healed. That weekend, I drove to the coast. I brought the ring with me, along with Eleanor's note. I walked down to the edge of the water and stood there, barefoot in the sand, letting the tide soak through the bottom of my jeans. And then, with a steady hand, I threw the ring into the sea. Not out of anger, not even for closure, but to mark the moment I finally, fully let go. Some stories end with slammed doors and burned bridges. But mine ends with something better. Peace. And maybe, just maybe, the start of something new, built not on illusion, but on honesty. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you've ever been through something similar, or if this story reminded you of a powerful historical moment where the truth came to light, share it in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you overcame betrayal or found clarity in the aftermath. And don't forget to subscribe to Reddit Confessions for more true, raw, and unforgettable stories like this one.